Yes, hello. And yes, a video like this probably didn't require the intro, but I like the intro, so sue me. And yes, further to the point, it has been a long-ass time since I made one of these type videos. I've been meaning to get back to sort of the broader philosophical videos for a while, and I've also been meaning to make a MRM-related video for a while, but the MRM is kind of a broad and very particular topic that I don't know if I'm competent enough yet to do unscripted, so I figured I'd basically do this one as a practice one. Anyway, so Sargon recently, Sargon of Akkad, made a very kind of dumbass point in a video on his Akkad Daily channel called Femcells. And he basically started the whole traditionalistic shaming thing and defended the traditionalistic shaming thing as though it's a worthwhile pursuit. Basically, how dare you acknowledge your personhood, men? You should be useful to your society and have no other particular purpose until you've done that. And this was extremely, kind of unhelpful. So I left, so I left this comment, and, it relatively easily summed up my thoughts on the matter, and then, not a couple hours later, one of my favorite YouTubers, DoctorRandomercam, released, this video where he basically, said everything that I said in that comment, but better and more comedically and more succinctly and more stylistically because, he's DoctorRandomercam and that is the thing that the honey jack does to him. The honey jack and that. So there's that. However, I think there was a point in that video that's worth at least parsing out in somewhat of a spurgy way, so I'm gonna do that, and hopefully this doesn't qualify as aid piggery, cause I know this is gonna involve getting kinda detail spurgy with some words, and that puts me in danger of being one of Mike's least favorite people for very good reason. I am totally on board with the whole calling out AIDS pigs for being AIDS pigs thing, but I'm hopefully going to be focusing primarily on, the concepts and the application of the concepts associated with the words, and so we're not going to get into, ridiculous semantic bullshit. Hopefully. If this turns into a thing, then I brought it on myself, but I just, my thoughts on this were too pedantic and too, just pedantry to put in the comments, because comments make detail very, very difficult to do on the YouTubes, and I'm better at expressing myself in lengthy, unscripted video things, and I needed a break from the Halloween special that I've been making for the last few days, so figured I'd throw my hat into the ring with this, and if it goes well, then I'll make that fucking MRM video that I've been sitting on for months trying to parse out how to do unscriptedly. As far as the actual substance of the issue now, well, no, I should throw in one more thing. I absolutely do not have a problem with Mike or any of the other honey badgers. I absolutely adore Allison and Karen and Hannah and Brian and just all of the other, honey badger mainstays. They are the reason I consider myself an MRA, so that being as it may. Hopefully I'm not going to fanboy too much, but I do respect them dearly, and getting that out of the way. I just thought he kind of missed the mark on this one particular thing, and my objections were substantive enough, I thought, to warrant a correction, and comments are cancer. So, video. Yeah, moving on. Because I can already hear the Monty Python rabble going, get on with it! Because it's been 4 minutes and I haven't gotten to a fucking point yet. So, yeah, to the point. Huzzah. Okay, I think I'm gonna start with this. Mike, in the way that he so often does, in this case, decided to reduce the definition of incel down to person who is wanting or desirous of sex but is not currently having it. And the problem is, I think there was some critical loss of mass in terms of the idea there. I get that those kind of strict logical definitions are to cut away at the emotionally projected context that are vomited onto things, but you might have slashed through a tendon somewhere there, dude. Okay, so that probably made a lot less sense outside of my head than it did inside it. So I'm gonna try to unpack and clarify exactly what I mean there now. God help me. Okay, so person who is desirous of sex but is not currently having it is a necessary feature of incel. It's a base stat, essentially, because of course that's what the words mean, if you take them separately and then conjoin them. But I think there are other features of the kind of person we refer to as an incel that don't just revolve around the emotionally vomited woo of, ideological expectation. For one thing, the origin of the term incel is essentially the, term for a kind of online support group, essentially, albeit an informal one, where men whose prolonged absence of affection has started giving them psychological issues and personal self-esteem issues and so on and so forth, can go to get some sympathy and some support and yada yada yada. And so I do think it's worthwhile keeping that portion of the implications, that portion of the baggage, intact without necessarily bringing in the woo. Essentially, the point made by the term incel is very similar to a point you made, Mike, in a video you did in response to Badmouth Productions, entitled A Basket of Sharp Goo, where you juxtaposed the Harlow's Monkey's need of affection is a prerequisite for living with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Essentially, a person who is an incel is someone who is starting to have those kind of affection deprivation withdrawal symptoms, if we can call it that. And that is a psychological disorder, in the same way as everyone feels sad, angsty, and even, kind of morose every now and again, I'm sure. But there is a different threshold for the clinical term for, depression and whatnot. And yes, it is kind of ambiguous, because those do get commingled and so on and so forth. But it's worthwhile maintaining the difference, because, clinical standards are a thing. And this is the other reason why I don't think we should stop using the term incel, because it is a functional term in its isolation. Like, it is a necessary descriptor, given that we live in a society where there are a lot of men who have been so sterilely, involuntarily celibate, not only in terms of physical intimacy, but also affection, that having a term for them is worthwhile. And you don't need to entertain the woo to find the concept useful. And I guess that's a good place as any to bridge to my next point. I don't think we should stop using the term incel. Because as I see it, the kind of thing that you did in your most recent video, Mike, is very similar to a lot of other instances, and I feel like I'll be able to put a finer point on what I mean by going through some of those examples. Back when nerd used to be an almost exclusively negative term, we as nerds, and my good lord, am I a nerd? So yeah, not gonna deny it. Back when that was an extremely negative term, a lot of people were just like, just quietly shame those parts of your identity and move on with your life, grow up, etc. And the correct response in that instance was, of course, no, I am a nerd, but nerd does not necessarily mean all those projected implications you've all projected onto it. Just because someone is a quirky, eccentric, extremely passionate, extremely niche-oriented, and possibly socially awkward intellectual doesn't mean that they are invalid as a person. And, of course, when Gamergate happened and the news media was like, just drop this label gamer. You can still associate the same things, but you can't use this semiotic signifier because of all this negative projected implications we projected onto it. So meh. So you can't be a gamer now. And of course, the correct response was, fuck you, I am a gamer, and moreover, I'm a gamergator, which essentially means that I actively participate in the gamer identity knowingly, even in the context of all that woo you've projected onto it. And of course, when Sargon started giving you shit, Mike, over the whole call things what they are, be an MRA thing, and yes, I realize I am way oversimplifying that. I mostly oversimplified it for the purposes of getting through the point and being humorous. Please don't interpret that as me actually believing that's what it amounted to. The correct response was, of course, I don't care what everyone else thinks this term means. It has a succinct definition, and that definition is worthwhile. I'm going to keep it. And of course, when you got into it with Jim over the whole autism thing, the correct answer was, there's nothing shameful about being autistic, fuck you. Class act as far as that goes, by the way. I absolutely adored the just absolute BTFOing that Jim got over that whole thing. Not because I have any personal malice against Jim, but because he was shown to be exactly the kind of edgelord nihilist that he has always apparently been. That's neither here nor there, though. And as another example, getting back to my sort of list of examples, a lot of people, especially on the SJW side of the argument, like to view the term SJW as just a disparagement, or just a disparagement of leftists, or just a random thought-terminating cliche, and they often are like, why don't you guys just get rid of the SJW term? It's so cringy, it's not like it actually means anything. And of course, the correct answer is, no, it in fact does mean a thing. If you examine the term, social justice warrior, what it essentially amounts to is moralizing sociocultural authoritarian. And in my opinion anyway, there aren't just left-wing SJWs, there are right-wing SJWs. I've never met a centrist or like liberal SJW, but you know, it is also possibly the case that it's because they don't work in absolutes quite as much. But yeah, SJWs can come from anywhere, because SJW, social justice warrior, means someone who wants a social aspect of justice to essentially be absolutist over and create a war over, a moralizing sociocultural authoritarian, as I like to put it. Similarly with incel, it has a descriptive function and even a borderline medical function at times. So we shouldn't just stop using it because of reasons. And even though I do think it, at least when used correctly, it does have a meaning that goes beyond its like most reduced literal meaning. In the sense that I think it essentially refers to when someone's involuntary celibacy actually impacts their life enough to become a meaningful portion of their identity. And yes, I know reducing things down to identities is shit, but, you know, sociological factors are a thing. In the same way as in the same way as you put a label on various mental conditions or personality types, or what have you, so too this term, while it may have a completely isolated literal term, also has actual substantive and, more importantly, organically applied parts of its definition that I think are worthwhile sort of clarifications on the concept, and that's the important thing. In short, I don't think we should stop using the term incel, because it has a practical use and a meaningful definition aside from the woo. I think the correct answer, much in the same way with many of those other examples I gave, is to say, no, this doesn't just strictly relate to its base terms, but neither does it relate to the woo. This has a function that is separate from the woo. Please stop projecting the woo onto it. There's nothing wrong with having the term incel, because, for one thing, it was something that the people it applies to created in the first place. And the main problem is essentially other people's reactions to it. Other people's extremely emotionally hysterical reactions to it. And if there was a reason to drop a term, it's certainly not "the feminists have beaten you, you've lost this one, bro." Because, again, that kind of... The irony there is palpable, you must admit. For reasons that I hope are not lost on you. But I have faith that they will not... Well, trust that they will not be. Fuck faith. And, yeah. And for those in the audience who are not Mike, or who may have just randomly stumbled on this, for the record, I'm bisexual and I mostly prefer dudes. So, not an incel. Very much not an incel. Do not define myself by what the women's think. So, fuck you for your implicit ad hominem random audience member that I'm anticipating in the comments. Fuck off. I guess that's sort of where I leave it. I hope this made sense. I really, really fucking do. As to how this actually, like, pertains to anything, and how my clarifications, I don't necessarily even want to call them corrections, just attempted clarifications, might change how we approach and deal with incels as a concept, or incels as a thing that exists. I totally agree, Mike, that A, no shame is the problem, more or less. And B, yes, we probably should be encouraging people to define themselves by something other than fucking sex. But in light that my sort of expanded definition involves the deprivation or long-term deprivation of affection as well as physical intimacy, the sort of added approach would be teach people to not define themselves by sex, but teach them to find compassion and affection other than sexual varieties of it. On that note, I guess this is where I end, or at least the end of the substance. This was kind of shit, I know. I hope it was at least unshit enough for its meaning to be conveyed, and for some people to maybe find it meaningful and entertaining and shit, because, you know, reasons. And this is my first attempt to sort of throw my hat in a much larger ring than I normally do, because I've never actually responded to A, someone I like, or B, a larger YouTuber before. So there's that. Because of the subject matter of this video, there's only one way I can end this, so goodbye, and fuck, or don't, however you bloody well please, but be affectionate to people, you know?